I don't know if you guys remember when I thrifted this little 90s red dress. I found this at the Red, White, and Blue thrift store on my way to checkout, and then I just grabbed it without trying it on. And then when I got home, I realized it was way too small and there was no way I could get the zipper up, and it was just too tight on the hips, too tight around the waist. It was just too tight everywhere. So I decided that this would be a really good upcycle piece to turn into something like one of these. So I'm going to be turning this maxi dress that is too small into a flowy top. Hello and welcome. My name is Bianca and this is a place to inspire and to be inspired. I love all things crafting and creating on a budget. When I was at the craft store, I did find this little pattern from Simplicity. It's for a long duster. I feel like if I modified this a little bit, instead of having it as a long duster, just cut the pattern to make it into like a flowy top that ties in the front. I don't like the scrunched sleeves on this, but that would be a super easy adjustment to just make them more of a bell sleeve instead of the scrunched sleeve. So I'm going to try to use this pattern to make a flowy top. I'm going to use this pattern more as like a guide, but I am going to also use this top that I have. I like the sleeves on this. So I think I'm going to try to stencil out this sleeve and then use this as my pattern for what I want the sleeves to look like on this top. I'm just going to loosely use this as a guide. I'm going to try to do as much as I can from scratch and just measure by eye. I don't know if that's going to be a good or a bad thing, but we will see. And before anyone comes after me telling me that I am ruining this beautiful dress, there are holes. I don't know if you can see, but there are holes all over the seam on this dress, all down the sides. I think someone previously altered it because when I look at the inside here, there's a serged edge here, but then there's a sewn edge just inside of that. And then in here, the inner lining, this is all, to me, it looks like someone just sewed this with a sewing machine to make it fit them, which is what I do. It looks like someone had already altered this to fit them perfectly, and now it's my turn to alter this into something else. And I'm not going to be using the lining on this. I'll probably just save it for a separate project. But for this top, I do want it to have like that sheer look. So I'm not going to be lining it. And I think that this fabric will be perfect for this project. The only thing is that I can use a regular sewing machine for this and then just do a rolled hem. But I think that I'm going to be using my serger a lot for this project just to make it more durable, since once I start cutting this fabric, it's going to fray like crazy. And I'm going to do the rolled hem setting on my Singer Professional 5 serger. So for me, that is going to be setting C, and it's going to use these 3 spools here. So I'm going to go to the craft store and get 3 spools of red because I only have white and black. We'll do that first, and then we can start measuring out the top and deciding if we have enough pieces and if we have to alter the top to make it shorter, which we may need to do if we don't have enough fabric. Okay, we got our red thread for the serger, and now I'm just gonna set this up so that it's ready to use. I'm gonna do a little test run along the bottom hem just to make sure that I have this set up correctly. Looks good to me. Since this top is going to be more loose and flowy and it's going to be kind of open in the front with just like a tie, I think I can actually use this top portion as my back panel. The armholes on here are very tight, but I think if I just cut it a little bit lower to open it up a little bit more, it'll be more loose for the armhole. I can't zip the back of this up. These 2 sides do not touch, and there is 0 stretch to this fabric, but I feel like this front panel could still be used as the back. If I'm able to use this top portion as my back panel, I think it will make my life a little bit easier because then I'll have more fabric down here to work with for the sleeves and then the little ruffles. So we're going to try to cut this portion out to be our back panel, and I'm going to use these patterns that I cut out. I'm going to see if this back panel will kind of match up closely with what the pattern is, because again, I'm not really following the pattern to a T. I'm using it as a guide, but since I'm using an existing dress and not just a couple yards of fabric, I'm gonna have to do a lot of altering as I go. So now this is going to be our back panel, and now we have all of this extra fabric to work with for the sleeves and then for the front. Since it's going to be a tie front top anyway, I think I might be able to use these two as our front panels. So now if I flip this over this way, this is where our zipper is here, and this top is going to have a tie front anyway, so this will all be open. So using these patterns, I just want to see if I would have enough, and this is where the armhole would go. I don't quite have enough fabric to do the scrunching here for the bust, so I don't know if I'll be able to use this. If I wasn't going to do any scrunching at the bust, I could probably get away with using this panel and then just not using this portion. I'm just going to cut away at some of this fabric that I'm not going to need. That way I can see exactly what I'm working with. I think for this part, I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm gonna cut it to this length all the way across. This here is our back panel. These are the two front panels that we have, and I'm gonna go along these edges and just hem them so that they don't start fraying on me. And then we can use our extra fabric here to start working on the sleeves and then the ruffles for the bottom. And to make it easier to see how much fabric I have, I'm gonna cut out this liner. And I'm gonna cut along this seam just so that I can open it up and see exactly what I'm working with. So now we can see there's a seam here and a seam here. These two panels are about the same size, so ideally I would like to use these for my sleeves, and then this panel I can use for my ruffles or to add a little bit of extra fabric to the front panel since they're a little bit small. So I'm going to use my seam ripper to take apart the seam on these two seams here. Normally I would just cut them to save myself the time, but I'm going to seam rip to save myself a little extra fabric. I thought I could do each of these panels and make a sleeve out of each panel, but once you fold it in half, for this part here, after I sew it, it would just be way too small to fit around my upper arm. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to use most of this fabric. I'm gonna have to attach these two pieces together to make one sleeve. And then for this bigger panel that I was gonna use for the ruffles and then to add some extra fabric to the front of that panel, I'm gonna have to use this for the other sleeve. But I think that even if I did this, I'll still have extra fabric that I can use for the ruffles. But if I don't have quite enough, then I decided I could probably just use this liner piece and make my ruffles with the liner. I originally didn't want to use the liner because it didn't have the pattern on it, and I wanted the whole thing to be in this floral pattern. But since we're making this upcycle out of an existing dress, we just have to work with what we have, and this is where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the pattern for these sleeves, and I'm going to try to keep as much fabric as I can along the sides that I can use as my ruffle. And then once I have the two arms, I can go ahead and attach this all together. And basically we will have the shell of the top once we attach the arms to these panels here. And then from there, we can see what leftover fabric we have to work with and try to make some ruffles so that it looks more finished along the hem. So now we can attach all of our pieces and then we'll try it on and we'll go from there. And to attach these pieces together, I'm going to use my regular sewing machine. Once I'm done with this project and I get everything where I want it, I'm going to redo these settings to do a serged edge along the seams. But I don't want to mess with it now because I already have this set to do the rolled hem along all of the raw edges. So once I'm done using the rolled hem setting, I will readjust all of this and then I'll go over the seams that I do with this just to reinforce it and make sure that it lasts longer. You don't need to use this. You can just do everything with the sewing machine, but I would recommend doing a rolled hem with your sewing machine. That way you don't have to deal with the raw edges. It's just going to take a little bit of extra time versus if you had a serger. Okay, Okay, here's our progress with one sleeve attached. Now that I have it on, I feel like I can show you guys what I mean when I say that like this front panel is just too small. And I'm gonna have ruffles along the inside and then along the bottom too. So I feel like that will help a little bit, but I still feel like I need just a thicker panel here to bring this closer together. And I'm gonna have to shorten the sleeves a little bit, but I just figured I would leave them long, finish the top, and then decide how short I actually want the sleeves to be. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and attach the other sleeve, and then we can see what extra fabric we have to work with to bring this in a little bit more in the front. Okay, ignore the fact that this sleeve is longer than this sleeve, but this is how we're looking so far. And instead of having the tie up here, I was thinking, what if I attached it down here at the bottom with a little tie and then added the ruffles along the neckline and then along the bottom? I think that would be really cute. And I think doing it this way, I wouldn't have to add in like panels of fabric here. I can just kind of have this be more open with the ruffles on the sides and then have the tie be lower. I think this could work. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hem along the neckline here the same way that I hemmed along the bottom. So this piece here is a part of the pattern that belongs to this top. And so this part of the pattern is for this little ruffle part that goes along the bottom. And since I'm just doing a top and I just want a thin ruffle that goes along the bottom, I ended up cutting this pattern in half to make it thinner. So I used these little clips here to attach the ruffle to the bottom. I hemmed the bottom the same way that I hemmed along the neckline with my serger. Now we're just going to go along with our sewing machine and we're going to attach the ruffle to the bottom band here. And then we're going to use this scrap fabric here to make a couple ties for each corner. And here is the result of our little flowy top. Again, this was my goal, something like this, but since we had limited fabric to work with, I had to make a couple alterations to my original plan, which I feel like that's normally how this goes on my channel. In my head, I thought that the maxi dress would give me enough fabric to make something closer to this, but at the end of the day, after I made the sleeves, I had very limited fabric to work with. Whatever scraps I had left, I used to kind of make this little ruffle that goes along the bottom. And then I also made this little tie out of the scraps that we had left over. I do have a decent amount of the red lining that was in this dress, so I could still use that for a future project, and I probably could have used the red to add like more ruffles to the front here. But I really wanted to use as much of this floral pattern as I could. And then I just cut the sleeves to the same length and then used my serger to seal off that raw hem. And if you only have a regular sewing machine and not a serger, you could fold it over twice to do a rolled hem. And I just paired this with my little Doc Marten dupes from Target, my mini skirt from Princess Polly, and then just a white strapless. I think this is from Target as well. I think it turned out really cute, so let me know what you guys think. And that is all for today's video, and until next week, bye!